First of all, thank you very much for being here today. I'm Dr. Pradeep Racherla. I am the Program Director for Woxsen School of Business. It's my privilege, and I'm very happy to do that, introduce Dr. Rob Wolcott. Dr. Rob Wolcott, as you must have read from the email, he is a professor of innovation at Kellogg School of Management, right, Northwestern University. And he's also the founder of Kellogg Innovation Network, which is a group of individuals from corporates and academics who evangelize innovation across the world, as simple as that. And he also owns a consulting firm called as Clario Partners, which is into management consulting, and they work with companies like GE and some of these Fortune 500 companies. So he's here today to talk to you about entrepreneurship, technopreneurship, and he comes with years and years of experience working with corporates and academics and executives, and he wants to share some of the secrets of being successful as an entrepreneur, some of the secrets of innovation, and what it takes for someone to take that leap eventually into the netherworld, if you want to call it that, right? Right. So without wasting too much time, I would like to invite Dr. Rob Wolcott.
Great, thank you. So let me turn this on. So it's good to be here. Is there anywhere I shouldn't walk? I guess too close to
No, the
that?
whole place is yours.
Okay. No, I mean, do we get feedback?
I don't think
from
so.
the audio. Okay. So I'm all wired up here. I might explode during the session. So it's wonderful to be here in Bangalore. I was here a few years ago, and it's exciting to see the city changing so fast. And I was reading a little bit about the history of the city. So it's really an exciting time here. It must be an exciting time for all of you. So I've got some slides and some things prepared. It's not going to quite be about secrets to success of being an entrepreneur, but maybe more a little bit about secrets to success as a human being, because most entrepreneurs actually are human beings. Now there are a few who maybe aren't, but we won't talk about them. So most of them are human beings, and so it's about living a life and finding a path.
I just want to quickly, my boss used to say, 94% of people are human beings.
Did you have an explanation for the other 6%?
No, you never explained that.
You'll know them when you see them, right? Yeah. So before we get started, though, we can make this very conversational. Why are you here? Any thoughts? And there are no wrong answers. There are stupid answers, but there are no wrong answers. Why are you here? Yes?
To get a perspective from with your experience of how to go about doing entrepreneurship, but more importantly, just 5 seconds ago I heard more meaningful of living, of life.
Great.
You have some sense of ethic and then you want to be a billionaire. That's a great combination.
Yeah. Well, by the way, the whole want to be a billionaire thing, that's nice. I'll sign up for that too. But I honestly, I wouldn't make that my primary objective. And I know a lot of people say this, but I want you to really think about it, because what we find is that most people who become billionaires did not start out, a few exceptions, most people who became billionaires did not start out thinking, my objective is to be a billionaire. Now, how do we do that? Okay, let's go to billionaire school, get a master's of billionaire administration or something. That doesn't exist. Instead, they found some other mission or objective that they were passionate about, excited about, and willing to go to the mat over, to work hard to do, and then for whatever reason, they ended up becoming a billionaire. So I maybe put that aside. Now, you've articulated that money is part of what you're interested in, which is fine. So probably you're going to choose some directions that give you access to financial wealth in some way. But I wouldn't be focused so much on becoming a billionaire, because if you do the things that you love, that you're passionate about, that you're going to be very committed to, you're much more likely to be financially successful. Yeah?
My reason for entrepreneurship is it's going to be a stepping stone for my for the long-term goal. I want to create a change in the world and the society I live in for my country, and I do realize that in this age you require money in some ways.
Yeah.
You can't be hungry and then give a speech of 1 hour.
Yeah.
No one is going to listen to you. You will not be effective.
That's how I feel sometimes.
Yeah, you will not be effective also.
Yeah.
Having understood that there are some requisites, then you go for the bigger goal, and then you'll have 5 steps. One of the steps is money.
Great. So I would agree with that. I think somebody rather well known here in this country says, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Right. So I think that's the right way to be. But one of the reasons that I'm in the business space, because my undergraduate degree was European and Chinese history, and then my master's and PhD are in industrial engineering. So how do you get new things to market? How do you operate and that sort of thing? I wanted to not just study technology, but I wanted to see how it got to market. I wanted to see how it became businesses, how it actually manifested in the world. So I think the business tool set is not the only, but one of the most powerful tool sets that humanity has ever created in order to make change happen, and often change happen in hopefully a sustainable way. And by sustainable, I mean environmentally, but I also mean economically sustainable, politically sustainable, et cetera. It's all part of the business tool set. And there is no more pure manifestation of that than an entrepreneur. But I want to clarify, when I say an entrepreneur, I could be talking about the pure entrepreneur who leaves their job and everybody thinks they're crazy, because usually everybody does think they're crazy at first, and builds a business from scratch and eventually, hopefully, becomes successful. That's the pure entrepreneur. That's what most of us think of when we think of an entrepreneur. But one of the things that excites me is that I've discovered you can be entrepreneurial in any context. You can be entrepreneurial in a large corporation. It's hard because everything in the corporation is set up against you, because everything in the corporation is set up to do what the corporation already does and do it really well, understandably, because you want your company to do what you do really well to be competitive. But if you're innovative and you want to try and do something new, it's difficult to do it. But you can try, and there are many examples around the world of people who've become entrepreneurial inside big companies, established enterprises. You can be entrepreneurial in a government setting. Now, hopefully it's for positive reasons. Often it's not, but hopefully the people in this room will be for positive reasons. You can be entrepreneurial in a nonprofit. Nonprofits are just businesses with a different tax status. A lot of people don't notice that. But you can be entrepreneurial in any setting. And so actually what I study is not entrepreneurship, necessarily the pure entrepreneur who leaves their job and starts a brand new company. I'm interested in that. I love that. My partners at Clario Partners and I are angel investors as well, so we've made angel investments in various companies. I refer to that as my tuition, because it's very expensive, so often you lose your money. But sometimes you luck out. It's a portfolio, right? I'll talk a little bit about that in my presentation. It's a portfolio of options on the future. So, for instance, we invested in Indiegogo, the crowdfunding company. That's done very well. They have follow-on, but I could tell you about 2 or 3 companies we invested in that have failed. So you never know which direction things are going to go, which is the essence of innovation strategy, is building a portfolio of options on the future. So what I'm going to do right now is summarize for you in 2 sentences my entire class at Kellogg. Now you might be thinking, wow, if he can summarize his whole 10-week class in 2 sentences, that must be a pretty sucky class. But anyway, I'm going to do it. So here you go. So the class is Innovation Strategy and Management. The essence of innovation strategy is creating a portfolio of options on the future. Now, on the future is redundant because obviously an option is for the future, but I say it for emphasis. The essence of innovation strategy is creating a portfolio of options. The reason is you never know where the future is going to go. We like to think we do. We just take what happened in the past couple of years and we extrapolate it out to the future. But if anyone wonders if that's the case, just look at the past, not the case, look at the past 6 or 7 years in the world and you'll realize it's not possible to predict the directions the world is going to go. So in context of uncertainty, your financial advisor or your professor of finance would tell you if you have high uncertainty, if you have risk, you need to do what? What do you need to do if you have, pardon?
Hedge your risk.
Hedge, or a version of diversify. You need to diversify your investments. And it's the same thing in innovation management. And as I'm going to say, it's kind of the same thing in life management or being an entrepreneur. The essence of innovation management, so that was strategy. The essence of innovation management is resolving uncertainty through a rational process. Resolving uncertainty through a rational process. And this is where my industrial engineering mind comes to play, because a lot of people think about innovation, they think, oh, wow, foosball tables, beanbag chairs, lots of fun stuff in Silicon Valley, do crazy things, and somebody becomes a billionaire. That happens occasionally, but usually that's not what it's about. Usually it's about coming up with a concept that isn't yet proven, that smells good, seems like it might work out, but you really don't know because you have a lot of uncertainty. And then if you're smart, what you do is you take that concept at the beginning, and a lot of people will take their first idea and they'll say, wow, that's great, and they'll run at it and they'll try and make it happen. And usually when you're doing something new, whatever your first idea is, first concept, first structure, is probably not the best way forward. There might be a kernel of wisdom or insight in that first concept that you don't want to lose sight of. But that whole concept is not usually the best solution in the long run. So what you want to do at the beginning, after you have your idea, you're with your small team, you're all excited, don't just run at it. Spend some time and try and expand it. This is called diverging. Go big, expand, look far out, look in new directions. Spend a little bit of time doing that. Diverging to make your opportunity space bigger, to explore more concepts and ideas, and then start to converge a little bit later, down on some more structured concepts and ideas. Now, even after you've done that, you still have a high amount of uncertainty. You've got a lot of assumptions in what you're thinking you might want to do. And so what you do as a good entrepreneur is you identify all those assumptions. You keep them very clear, because a lot of times people make mistake that a lot of people make is they have assumptions that they think after a while they start to believe as facts, because they haven't paid attention to the fact that it was merely an assumption, not a fact. And you don't know if something's going to succeed until people are paying you money for it. You really don't know. Even if you think it's the best, even if your mom says, oh man, that's the best thing I've ever seen, and you don't know until it's in the market and people are paying you for it. So you uncover all those assumptions, all those uncertainties. And then as a good entrepreneur, you don't try and solve all of the uncertainties up front, because that could be expensive, it could take time. Instead, what we want to do is identify the most important uncertainties that need resolving at the beginning, and try and resolve some of those as much as we can with little to no money. So try and resolve the big uncertainties early on with as little to no money, and that's challenging. Obviously, the uncertainties I like the most, being an industrial engineer, if any of you are from that space, you'll sort of see some of this coming into what I'm saying. The uncertainties I like the most are the really big uncertainties, the ones that are really important, that resolving that uncertainty adds a lot of value to our project, but it's cheap to resolve. These are the best ones, because I can spend a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of money, resolve a really big uncertainty. That increases the value of my opportunity. Or I might discover I'm totally wrong, and then I can say, didn't know that was illegal. Okay, I guess we're not going to do that. And by the way, I've seen that happen before. People get all excited about a new business concept, and they say, oh, this is the greatest thing. And somebody, smart person, says, well, do you know if that's legal or not? Well, I don't know. And then they call an attorney, or they call somebody in the government, heaven forbid, but sometimes you have to do it. You call somebody in the government and you find, whoops, that was illegal. It would take us 3 years to get accreditation or a permit or whatever to do this, and so that blows up our concept. So this is the idea of a big uncertainty, is it legal or not, with a low cost to resolve. A low cost to determine, is it legal or not. It didn't cost me anything more than talking to a few people, and now I know. But if I had waited, if I had developed that new app, if I had gotten a team together, if I had gotten $50 from my mom to get this thing started, and I waited 6 months, and I'm all excited, and then I find out later, oh my gosh, it was illegal, now I got a problem. So this is the notion of resolving uncertainty through a rational process. It's not necessarily all just the fun, go out, exciting fun stuff that you see in the papers. It can be a structured process of identifying uncertainties and resolving them. I'll give you a little tool that venture capitalists use all the time that I love, that helps me to structure the thinking in early stage ventures. And this could be at a big company, it could be in an independent entrepreneurial situation. And that is 4 different kinds of uncertainty, or 4 different kinds of risk. One is market uncertainty. So in general, market uncertainty refers to the question, will people buy it? Now there could be a lot of questions underneath that, like will they like it like this? Will they like it in green? Will they like it in blue? Will they pay for it in installment payments? Will they pay for it all in cash? Will people buy it? That's market uncertainty. What will the competition do if I do this? That's market uncertainty. The second bucket, the second kind of uncertainty, is product or technology uncertainty. Will it work? Will this thing work? I have this idea for a floating car, but will it actually work? I don't know. So we have to do some research to find out if this technology will actually work, if this process will work the way we think the process will work. That's product or technology uncertainty. The third kind of uncertainty is financial risk or financial uncertainty. And you kind of know what that is. It's going to cost me $100,000 to find out if this will work. I've got $100,000 at risk, etc. Or I've mortgaged my house to raise money, that sort of thing. The fourth kind, and this is the one that most people don't pay much attention to, is organizational risk. This one's the dangerous one, whether you're an independent entrepreneur or at a corporation. And they're very different. This is one way that being entrepreneurial in a corporation is very different than being entrepreneurial as an entrepreneur. What do you think would be organizational risk for an independent entrepreneur? What might that mean?
Keep people move.
Keep people leaving. Okay, that's one. I've got my friend, and he's the technology wizard, and he gets pissed off at my wife, and he leaves. Okay, well, that's organizational risk, and now the whole company's at risk because my chief technologist has left. Great. Or my lead salesperson has left. Right? If you're at a big company, what might organizational risk mean if you're trying to be entrepreneurial in a big company?
Roles and responsibilities.
What do you mean?
Roles and
responsibilities. What do you mean?
what they are asserted to do certain things.
Okay.
They mingle with each other.
Yeah, okay. So in an established organization, people have their territories, they have their responsibilities, they get incentivized, they make money based on certain objectives, and what you're doing might not fit into that. It might conflict with that. And that generates risk for you for your project. And a lot of people in innovation projects at big companies, which is what I tend to look at, they get very excited about understanding the technology or maybe understanding the customers, which is great, but then they ignore the organizational risk or they don't spend enough time on it. And what I found, what many researchers have found, is often the organizational dynamics that kill projects in big companies. It's not always because the product didn't work. It's not always because the customer wouldn't like it. It's because of some sort of internal organizational dynamic of resource allocation, power, politics. Not that there would ever be any politics in big organizations. So this is organizational risk. So these are the 4 kinds of risks, and then I'll come to your question or comment. Market risk, will people buy it? Product or technology risk, will it work? Financial risk, how much money do I have at stake or others have at stake? And organizational risk. And so as an entrepreneur or a corporate entrepreneur, you need to keep all 4 of those in mind on a regular basis, identify them, and then figure out actions you can do to resolve that uncertainty in a rational way. Yeah.
You could also risk going against the old guard, the senior people in the organization. Yeah. Their beliefs of having worked for 2 decades or 3 decades would have been entirely different based on their past experiences of that sector and market.
Yeah.
And then you come with fresh energy and then you believe that the next 30 years are going to be different.
Yeah.
And you would want to sow the seeds, but they're now going to be agreeing with you. It could be insecurity, it could be the traditional approach and more secure way of organizing.
Absolutely.
So you would be countering all this. And you have to be really smart to convince them and give them some safety net to say that if this doesn't happen, at worst, we could lose this much only.
Right.
And then probably you'll be able to convince them.
Right. And also always keep in mind that, and this is tough for an entrepreneur because you're passionate about your idea and you think it's fabulous, and maybe it is, you might actually not be right. You might be wrong. And those people that are running that company that have been there for 30 years, well, they're not idiots necessarily. That doesn't mean that they are missing. They might be missing something big about the future. That's true. So you always have to keep a level of humility in your mind. You have to keep other people around you that can help give you that humility. So one of the things I love is if you're an entrepreneur, make sure your husband or your wife are really informed about the business, because then they can give you humility. They can help maintain your level of humility. There's also another thing I like to do. Entrepreneurs tend to be very optimistic. You almost have to be an optimist to be an entrepreneur because it's so daunting, so difficult. The odds are all stacked against you. It's much easier to do things the way everybody else does them. That doesn't get you to the top. As Steve Jobs said, innovation distinguishes the leaders from the followers. And that's what we all aspire. We aspire to make big things happen, to change the world and all that. But it's always going to be really hard. And so that tends to mean that most entrepreneurs are intrinsically optimistic, which is a good thing. I'm an optimist. But optimists really need an occasional partner, powerful employee, peer, husband, wife, who's somewhat more of a pessimist or critical, hopefully constructively critical. I don't mean somebody who's just like negative about everything. I mean something constructively critical, yeah.
Did you mean realist or pessimist?
I kind of mean both, like a realist with more of a critical eye. So pessimist might be too strong, but the more optimistic you are, the more you need somebody who's going to really give you that sense of realism. So there's a model I like to use in thinking about this, and it was called Tiggers and Eeyores, and I'm quite serious about this. Anyone know who Tigger and Eeyore are? It's from a book called Winnie the Pooh. Remember Winnie the Pooh when you were a small child? Do you read that?
That's not part of the Indian thing.
Well, there are a few heads nodding, So it's a children's book. And Winnie the Pooh, this bear, has some friends. One is a tiger called Tigger, and the other is a donkey called Eeyore. Tiggers and Eeyores. And it turns out the research is rather clear that people tend to be more Tigger or more Eeyore. Most people are more an Eeyore or more a Tigger, and you could probably figure out which one you are, and if you can't, ask your spouse. They'll be able to tell you which one you are. And I believe, and I've seen this happen many times, that if you're making a really important decision, you need to make sure you have both around the table. You need to make sure you have both at the table. One of the fellows who was a mentor to me in my 20s was a technologist, has 2 PhDs in physics. Don't know why he has 2, but he does. He founded 12 companies in his life, and 8 of them were successful. That's a really high hit rate. Brilliant guy, very funny guy too, on purpose. And I learned this from him. So in his company, which was a technology company development company, it was not a VC. They had their own money, and they would come up with new technology business concepts, mostly business to business, no consumer stuff. And there were 9 people, John and then 8 other people who ran the company. And they would get together on a monthly basis for the investment committee meeting. And he said anytime we were going into an investment committee meeting about a new business concept, where I knew that everybody around the table loved that new concept and everybody was excited about it. And honestly, that would often be the case because John is an optimist, the founder, and John is also very persuasive. He has a powerful mind. He's very persuasive. He's been right so many times that if John thinks it's a good idea, then everybody else, not because they're just trying to curry favor with him, but because they actually believe him. You know, he's got a great mind, he's usually right, so everybody then loves it. And what he said was, I had to often go to a couple people in advance of the meeting. Say a couple weeks before, he would go to 2 of the people going to the meeting and say, look, I know you love this new business concept we're looking at, everybody knows that. But I want you in the next 2 weeks to figure out every reason why this will fail. I want you to come to the investment committee meeting to convince us not to make this investment. That's your job. Now everybody will know I told it that it's your job, so they won't think that you've all of a sudden gotten pissed off at them or something. You know, your job is to come in and convince us to not make this investment. And while I was there, I was an intern during my PhD program there for a year and a half. And there were 2 situations where we walked into that meeting. I was just sitting against the wall listening and interacting and all, but I wasn't making decisions at that point. There were 2 situations where I saw this dynamic cause a group of people walk into the room ready to go, ready to spend $1.5 million to invest in something new, and by the end of the meeting they decided not to do it because we had Eeyores in the room. But if, as John used to say, if you only have Tiggers, then everybody will jump off a cliff together. And if you only have Eeyores, nothing ever gets done because I have the realists in the room or the pessimists. I tend to think that realists are generally pessimists in disguise. Right? Because you said it, change the world. Somebody who's going to be an entrepreneur is looking to change the world. A realist will not see the world as it could be. A realist will see the world as it currently is. But I want a constructive realist on my team. I want a constructive realist who's willing to take a little bit of a leap of faith with me to try and make new things happen. So any other thoughts? Why are you here? Anybody else? What are you trying to understand? You get to talk because you just put your hand up. Even though it was by, this is like an auction. You just bought it, man. Hey, give him the microphone, Pradeep. Don't scratch your head or anything. I mean, you're gonna get called on. Yeah. Okay.
maybe to come in that video, wherever the video is going to be displayed. So I was very interested. The person who called me, I asked him about this event. So he explained about you and what it's going to be about entrepreneurship.
Great.
And so I was enrolled into it. I thought, I should. I didn't think about it or why I should go. I thought I should go.
So you didn't think about it, but you thought you should go.
I didn't like
Nothing
sit and
else
think.
going
It's
on
just a
today.
thoughting.
Got it.
Yeah, probably I should be there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
A slow
nothing
Saturday.
specific.
It's a slow Saturday, basically. Okay. Okay, one more, yeah.
Hi, Sonic. Yeah, so as you said, when I got a call from someone saying that would you want to come down on Saturday, and I normally say no because so I have a startup and we're doing really well. So last year I was planning to go in for grad school and I decided not to because I wanted to continue on the startup. And he said that there's someone who's coming in from the Kellogg's School of Business, and he's going to talk about entrepreneurship. And that's when my horn started ticking in. I said, why not come down and talk to you for a while?
Okay, great.
So.
Well,
which company do you run?
So we run the biggest youth magazine in the country. It's called Campus Diaries, and we are building a social network around content. It's called Campus Diaries as well. So we are the biggest social network around writers, photographers, artists, painters. And so, yeah.
great.
Usually focused on the campus.
Yes. So we have yes. So we have about 85% people who are from campuses, colleges all across the country: India, US, Singapore, and a few places out there. And yes.
Wow, fabulous.
Exciting.
Great.
Thanks.
Great. So each one of you has done something entrepreneurial by listening to an intuitive. There wasn't a structured decision process that you went through, but you thought, well, that sounds like something that might be useful. Well, heck, I'll try it out and see what happens. And what you're doing in this process is building a portfolio of options based on opportunities that life presents in front of you. And oftentimes life carries us along in a particular direction. And unless we have the discipline to stand back and be, as I say, strategically unfocused, unless we have the discipline to be strategically unfocused, then life will continue to carry us along on one particular direction. And it may or may not be the right direction for you. And it's your job to determine, am I going in the right direction? Am I on the right path? Is this where I am meant to be? Because no one else is going to do that for you. A lot of people will have opinions, but you're the only one ultimately who should be making those decisions. And it takes some guts sometimes, and it's not always entirely clear where you need to be going, but you look for the guideposts. So I think it's a reasonable time to go through a few slides, and this is not a typical presentation about being an entrepreneur. If you want to talk about being an entrepreneur, I'm happy to stick around. We'll have Q&A. After, I could even stick around for a little while. We could have a chat and fill up some of your Saturday evening if you like. Instead, this is an excerpt from my concluding lecture at Kellogg, where all my classes, whether it's the full-time class or our part-time class or our executive MBA classes. I teach in Hong Kong for our program. I teach in Miami, which is for Latin America. Kellogg has a small campus in Miami, and then also in Chicago. And I thought about this in particular for these Woxsen sessions because Woxsen is trying to take a brand new direction in business education. It's something that I'm excited about given my field of innovation and entrepreneurship, but also that this tool set of innovation and entrepreneurship isn't just relevant for business, it's relevant for how we live. It's relevant for how we make decisions. And very few successful entrepreneurs didn't go through a major period of personal testing. I'm sure that you've overcome some adversity already in building your business. Probably some things you didn't expect would happen. So it's very much about testing yourself personally. And so the concluding lecture I do at Kellogg is not about the frameworks or the research regarding how we run businesses or innovate, and the whole class is about that. Instead, it's stepping back and asking students to think about applying the tools that they learn at business school to how they live their lives. And the reason I started thinking about this a number of years ago was when I was doing my PhD, it was the dot-com boom. Now, you're probably all too young to remember that, but there was a boom back in the dark ages where, yeah, Yeah.
How do you transition from history to industrial engineering? I mean,
You don't. It's impossible. So the question was, how do you transition from history to industrial engineering? You don't. I don't recommend it to anyone. How?
Notice that Americans tend to do that.
It is a little easier. It's a little because we don't know what we're doing.
I
We're
know.
like, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
No. So to be honest, my case, and this is just my case, my first love academically is history. I love history. In fact, it's almost embarrassing to say this, but before I came down here, I was reading about the history of Bangalore on Wikipedia. And then I kept clicking through, Prince of Mysore, what's that? Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And I realized I'd burnt through like an hour reading about some random history of Bangalore. But because that's what I love. And so as an undergrad, I tend to believe, and this is what I did, my father believed the same thing, when you're an undergrad, you should study what you love. Now, you need to do some of the other stuff, too. You should study some statistics, regardless of what you think about statistics, right? But you should study what you love, and then life will take you where it takes you. But I also have always loved innovation. So when I was in 4th grade, I checked a book out of the library called American Heritage Illustrated Book of Men and Their Inventions. It was a history of the Industrial Revolution. And I fell in love with it. And actually got in trouble because I kept the book too long, and the librarian called my mom, and I got in big trouble. But in any case, I knew I wanted to be in innovation, and so I didn't want to be a historian about innovation. I wanted to work with real engineers and real companies about how they do it. And so I knew I needed a quantitative degree. I needed a degree that would make me at least a little bit credible with engineers. And so, long story, but I chose industrial engineering. So in order to do that, I had to go to school at night for a couple years while I was working to get the qualifications to apply to go into engineering that I didn't get as a history major. So it was a hard path, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I stayed committed to it. But related to that transition, when I was doing my PhD in the engineering school, it was the dot-com boom. And so a lot of my friends and colleagues from Kellogg or from the engineering school, I was at the engineering school at Northwestern, so I've spent my whole career at NU, were running out to Silicon Valley to become an entrepreneur. And being an entrepreneur at the time meant to get a job with a tech company making the same amount of money you'd make at an investment bank, and then it goes public in a year and a half, and you become a billionaire. And so somehow that was everybody's vision of being an entrepreneur, becoming a billionaire in a year and a half. Well, we now know that that's probably not what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So that didn't work out. And then a couple years later, I saw other colleagues from business schools running to become hedge fund managers or private equity investors. And of course, the global financial meltdown caused us to wonder whether that was the right path as well. Now, I am not saying that being a hedge fund manager or a technology entrepreneur or a venture capitalist is a bad business. It can be great businesses. But instead what I'm saying is there tends to be this fad cycle. And people see what everybody else is doing and they say, oh, isn't that exciting? But I reflected on what people learn at business school, and there was a problem here, because in business schools we learn about differentiation. We learn about competitive strategy, positioning your company in a different way from the competition, being different, distinguishing yourself, your business, etc. Well, if we learn about distinguishing ourselves and differentiation, why is it that everybody leaves business school and takes the same jobs as everybody else? That doesn't really seem to make sense. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea to take a job with Hindustan Lever or Infosys. These are great companies, great experience. But as I said before, once you get on that path, unless you have the discipline to stand back and ask if you're going in the right direction, you'll just keep getting sucked along. And so the question I was asking myself is, if we're learning about differentiation, how do we think about that kind of thing, strategy, differentiation, branding, in our own personal lives? So I thought about the history of innovation, various things that I've seen in this space, and asked, what does it mean for how we make decisions in our lives? And so what I'm going to do is share a few insights, a few thoughts. This is not a rigorous set of research. It's more a set of stories. And I won't get to all of them. I'm going to skip some of them because I want to keep us on time and have some time for your conversation. But hopefully you'll find them at least a little bit interesting. So first of all, always keep the mission in mind. What are you trying to accomplish? And this could be at your business, as an entrepreneur, as a corporate executive. It could be in your personal life. What are you trying to accomplish? A lot of people think they know what they're trying to accomplish, but when they sit down and try and write it out, they realize they don't really understand, or they realize that other people in the organization don't have the same vision of what we're trying to accomplish. And it's important as a leader to align everybody around what are we really trying to accomplish and keeping that fresh on a regular basis. So my best, most poignant experience with this was with this fellow, Bill Perry. So Bill Perry was Secretary of Defense under Bill Clinton, and according to most people, one of the best we've ever had in America. I mean, he's a fabulous individual as well as an exceptional administrator. And my group that the professor mentioned earlier, called the Kellogg Innovation Network, is a group of innovation and growth leaders from around the world, and we get together a few times a year to share our problems. It's like a support group for innovating. And we were out at Cisco in San Jose at their executive briefing center. And there were 40 of us. And these are senior vice presidents from big companies like GE and Motorola and Microsoft, and they're feeling pretty good about themselves. And then Bill Perry walks in. Now Perry is now again professor at Stanford. He's a very modest guy, very unassuming. He drove himself down to Cisco, showed up. He had the worst slides I've ever seen in a corporate presentation. Times New Roman, bullet points, black and white, no pictures, horrible slides. But one of the most profound messengers was one of the most profound messages I've ever heard. And all he did was tell stories. He was enchanting. You could see why people want to follow Bill Perry. And so as he was telling these stories, he came to the following story. And that was during his first tour of duty in the Pentagon in the 1970s in the Carter administration. The world had a huge problem. And that was the Soviet Empire had overwhelming conventional force superiority in Europe. And had the Soviet Union decided to roll its tanks across Western Europe, there was nothing we could have done about it, except bomb or not bomb. Now this was not a good set of options. And so Perry and others in the administration, others were thinking this too, said we at least have to try to come up with alternatives to a nuclear weapon. And so he went to DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. This is the place where the US military invests in crazy things like telekinesis, which they have invested in, but also the internet. You might have heard of the internet came out of this. And so he went to DARPA and said, what are your best things? What do you got? And they quickly chose smart weapons, smart sensors, and stealth. And you've probably heard of these things since. And remember, this was the mid-70s. And he said to his team, get it done in 4 years. Now, as he's telling this story, I cut him off. And I said, Secretary Perry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I have to point something out to my Kinians. We call ourselves Kinians, my big executives sitting around in the room feeling pretty good about themselves. I said, you have here on one slide the objective, the strategy, and the terms of engagement that helped, it was not the only factor, but that helped to bring down the Soviet Empire. And I looked at my executives and I said, which one of your CEOs could articulate your objective, the strategy, in less than 40 words on one slide? And they all looked down at their BlackBerries and the answer was clear, not mine. So I would ask you, in your business, for instance, or others, what is the basic strategy? What is the objective? What is the mission? And then what is the basic strategy? And be very succinct about it. Because you find the higher you go in an organization, the more people are working for you, with you, depending on you, partnering with you, buying from you, etc., the more simple your message, not simplistic, they're different. The more simple your message must be, the more clear your words must be to keep so many different people aligned. And this is true whether you're a business leader, a successful entrepreneur, a government leader. And so Perry's ability to distill down the essence of the mission into very clear terms was one of the reasons he's been so successful in his career. And one thing I learned from my military friends, I have not served, but I have great respect for those who have and who do, is they always think about the notion of mission. Now, it's not the same sort of mission we think of in business when you say, what's the mission of your business? Make the world a better place. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about objectives. You can sort of think, when they say mission, my mission today is, they're really thinking objectives. And everybody in military has objectives, all the way from the top general down to the new private on the line. And hopefully the small objectives, the small missions, roll up into bigger and bigger missions, and if you're doing it right, they all add up to achieving the big mission. And they think about mission in two ways. Number one, mission focus. Are we focused on the right things? Number two, mission clarity. Does everyone understand the mission? Does everyone understand the mission who needs to, and do they understand it properly? Are we all aligned? And these are two different things. Mission focus, are we working on the right things? And then mission clarity, do we understand what we're trying to do? Not how we're doing it, but what we're trying to achieve, and they're different. So I would suggest as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, as a human being, if it's important, we should continually think about what are we really trying to